ahead and call to order this meeting of the Special Fiscal Committee of the Bloomington Common Council for Thursday, October 23rd. We have with us committee members Isak Asare.
Hello.
Hope Stosberg. Myself, Isabel Piedmont Smith, and Dave Rollo.
Hello.
And from the council office, we have Mari Bennett and Lisa Lehner. From the clerk's office, we have Sophia McDowell. And hopefully soon we will have the controller and the deputy mayor join us. So looking at the agenda, are there any suggestions for revisions? Yes, Hobie.
It's not a revision suggestion. I just want to appreciate that there's public comment under each of those subheadings because I think that'll be an easier way to include the public in the meeting. So I think that's a good improvement. Thank you, Chair, for formatting that a little bit.
Well, and I think that we need to add public comment under number 4. I think that one might be helpful.
I was wondering why it wasn't under number 4, but
Oversight.
okay. Do we need a motion to add it, or are you just declaring that we're adding it unless anybody has objections?
Does anybody have objections to adding public comment to item 4? Okay, let's just do it. Now that Deputy Mayor Knapp and Controller McClellan are here, I actually would like to propose that we move number 2 to after number 3. Because Deputy Mayor Knapp, you have to leave at 12, is that right?
Yes.
Controller McClellan, do you also have to leave early, or?
No, I do not.
Okay. So I wanted to do item 3 while Deputy Mayor Knapp was still here. We might get to that anyway, but is that all right if we just move that up before number 2? All right, so let's start with that. So improving the budget process, reflecting on what we just went through, and next steps for outcome-based budgeting. I think we do need to talk about actually prioritizing our outcomes, increasing public engagement, and then looking at the calendar for the next budget season. There's somebody in the waiting room. So I will open it up. Do people have suggestions for?
Do we need to officially approve the agenda first?
I don't think so. We've been kind of informal about these things. So I don't know if Gretchen or Jessica, speaking of being informal, I'll use first names if you don't mind. If you have ideas already about next steps, and then I think Isak also, since he was part of the task force, might have some ideas. So let's just have a discussion.
Okay, and I think Jessica has she's been thinking through timelines and tasks, and so I'll let her address that. But I think just from our standpoint, some things that would be helpful, I think, would be having gone through the exercise, and you've seen kind of what some of our struggles were in trying to figure out how to communicate information. There are 2 things that would be very helpful for us to have from council, and one is some feedback on how granular you would like the reporting to be, and the examples, whatever the outcomes are, we need to decide how granular to be in how we use our new software tool, because how we use that is the tool for assigning costs to programs. So as we're measuring outcomes against what we're spending, we need to make sure that we agree on some of these fundamental concepts. And so the 2 examples I would ask you to compare and think about, and we don't have to discuss in this meeting unless you have immediate thoughts, but give us some feedback on, would be comparing, for example, Parks, who put all youth programs was just youth programs. That was one number for them, one category, versus CFRD, which has a lot of discrete programs that we could bundle into, for example, I'm making up these categories, but it could be resident commission-led events or cultural events versus community trainings, things like that. How broad or how narrow would, for council's purposes, would be effective. That would be helpful to know. And then the second thing I would say is that we need to understand and agree on what an outcome is. So if you think about a logic model, a lot of things that were discussed as outcomes this year are actually inputs, not outcomes. So for example, hire a person is an input. Double the budget of fill in the blank is an input. The outcome, presumably, would be something like get all of our roads to 30% status, or grade 99 or something like that by X year. It's not double the budget of roads. That would be the way that you would achieve that outcome. So I think certainly hearing from council what some of those outcomes, reframing things as outcomes would be helpful. And I would understand, naturally need some input from the departments in question about how does that work. And then the final thing I'll say is that we do have a person in our legal team who was in Dallas at the time that they implemented their outcomes-based budgeting, and she told me one thing they did there in terms of public engagement that I thought was really cool, which was they engaged all of the staff. Once you had the outcomes, they engaged the staff in preparing the information on, here's what this program costs, here's how we'll get there, and then had like a public fair with tables so that people from the public could circulate and actually talk with the employees who do that work to better understand what it is and how they had come up with these particular goals and subsets. So understanding how granular would be helpful for the information, and maybe there are some areas where you would like us to be more granular than others, that's fine. Setting some actual outcomes and then working backwards from that to what would the inputs be to achieve those outcomes would be helpful. And then I just want to throw that kind of resource fair, or involving all of city staff, because it's such a heavy lift to make this transition, and we having a bunch of presentations in depth on each outcome from each person, each program, would be extraordinarily time consuming and probably not very effective. So it might be easier to start with something where folks can circulate and learn about the things that interest them the most, and then have some more formal events around that. Mm-hmm. That's my speech.
Great. And then as far as the timeline, we'd like to get started with staff again in sometime in November, but it will probably bleed into January because of Thanksgiving and Christmas and end of year work. But get started in November on going back to every department doing their work on assigning all their costs to all of their programs. And that's going to be a huge, huge lift. We did all the work to define all the programs, and that was all in the budget. And now we have to assign the cost that we are spending on each of those programs. And so that's the next part of the work.
And then if you decide that you would like to roll some things up, it's easier to roll them up once we have the granular detail. Easier to do that than to say, we've put in all these numbers and now we're going to go back and break them up and create separate ones. So we'll keep going on our end while you ponder the granularity question.
I have a bunch of questions and thoughts. First, a general question for council is, are we required by law to have presentations on the budget, like the way that we do it? Like, does so we can choose what gets presented, and so, like, for example, we could say, as one test case, we could say, you know what, we only want to talk about, homelessness, just as an example. Could we choose to do that and not actually have, okay. So with that in mind, I think it's, and then also a question about the software. So the software that we have now allows what level of granularity and are we going to be fully implementing this in terms of the software? Like, we have it, we're making the full transition this year, so we'll be able to actually do exactly as Gretchen said.
It allows you to go as granular as you want, but they have done this in hundreds of cities, and they don't recommend going too granular.
Super granular. Yep.
That it just doesn't work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and also it's like it's
Wow.
impossible. I mean, the more granular you get, the more difficult it actually is to
Yes.
assess it, right?
Yeah,
Like-
exactly. That is the reason it doesn't work well. The software
Exactly.
works fine, like
Right.
it will do it,
Like-
but the reason you're doing it, then you can't achieve that goal if it's too granular. Yeah.
Our office has been going through this process too.
Right. Right.
Oh yeah. Yes. Definitely.
So my just initial thoughts and maybe high level reactions I think to both of those things is that I think what could be a way to go about this is that so thinking sort of about stages, we need to much earlier have our set of outcomes, right? And so that we should really, I think that needs to be like Q1 discussions need to be outcome setting discussions where we've usually left for Q2, right? Or even Q3, right? I mean, so I think we should have that first round of this is what we think we're working towards, the things we want to see in next year's budget, so that we can have the discussions about, I think there's a theory of change part maybe that was, that then helps with and by theory of change I just mean like some type of concept that would have to be worked out with departments about, okay, if this is the outcome we want, how do we think we can move that needle with our program spending, et cetera, with our inputs, I think, as you put it. So I think that if we started that, could we start that in January? Could we start that in, like how early can we start that conversation?
I think the earlier you start it, the better. And I think, on the city side, we have a sense internally in departments and at the administrative level of what outcomes we're looking for, although translating that into a SMART goal and like really taking the thing you think and making it one sentence that's very clear is a challenge. But for you all, I think, just thinking of your usual calendar where your first meeting isn't until a little later in January, we start working on the math and building out what we actually can do for the budget, in May. So whenever you start it, having that information to us by April would be fantastic, because let's say that an outcome that you want is something that we're not currently doing. That requires the people who are doing the work to really think about, okay, what would I do that would achieve that goal? How would that impact? Where would I make cuts? So it's not just we got it and we plugged it in. There's a little work to do, and that would give us enough time to do the work, the conceptual work, enter it into the math work, enter it into the program, and then get us on track for having a budget that.
So I think
on time.
With that in mind, I think that we have this committee continues to meet. I think that this committee we should be like at our next meeting start having conversations about potential outcomes, because it's going to take, I think, a long time to get to some real agreement about that. But I think that this committee would be very useful to have a sort of wireframe, if you will, something to react to that we can give to the rest of council that we can then build upon. And I think we should start that work now.
I agree, and especially if you think about if we want to do any kind of public engagement, like fitting that in as well. What we're saying is we're going to do all of the math, all the conceptual work, come to agreements, do all the public engagement in essentially 6 months. Because we'll be building the budget book in July, whatever it looks like, that's when the work has to be done. So that's a pretty fast timeline.
In terms of that engagement fair that you were talking about, what would be a good time of year in terms of staff figuring that stuff out for that kind of event to happen?
Have to be after we'd come to some agreement on some outcomes and created the work, right? So if people are going through, it's not very fun to go to the table and say, oh, we have this program, but I don't know how much it will cost or what it will achieve.
And one thing
So I'd have to think about that. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I think we have
guess
to
I'm wondering,
plan for that.
Is that a pre-summer thing or a budget season thing in terms of August, September-y kind of time?
That's a great question. I don't know.
If we really want to embrace what feedback we get from the public, it would have to be earlier.
Right, but then I guess I'm wondering whether then staff would be able to get that kind of stuff together. Well, Lisa and I already started talking a little bit about the schedule for next year and thinking about things like deliberation sessions and thinking like,
Right.
in June, should there be some kind of a budget deliberation session type thing right before we go on summer recess? And so depending on what the needs are, that could potentially be a really interesting fair type.
June is
Well,
way too late for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think we have to
And-
shift our paradigm. Like, I don't think, based on what Gretchen just said and what I was just saying, I think you need to totally disabuse yourself of the way that we've done it in the past. Like, it does not track. Like, we need to have made most of the decisions that we make in like April. We need to have made those decisions in like February.
Well, I guess like what's the point of that fair then? Because I thought part of the point of that fair was to communicate to the public how we're spending our money, not to get the public's input on how they think we should be spending our money. So I was approaching it from that first assumption that we're communicating to the public how we're spending, not getting input from the public about how we should spend.
Well, I guess, here's what I say, thinking about staff and thinking about, having been at the city all of 2 whole years now, the pace is excruciating and there is always a lot of work to do. And so I can't overestimate enough how big of a lift this is for staff. It is enormous. And so if we can be supportive of that and acknowledge that this is a big lift for our people, and what I mean by that is not everything that we might want to do for this process in the future may not be able to fit in the calendar for this year. So we should probably try to be realistic about what would be good progress to make in this year, and how much of our ideal packet can we get done in 1 year, and what could we add in next year when we've crossed the first bridge of, okay, we agree on the granularity, we know how the process works, what else can we add in? Because I will say it's very discouraging when staff have worked very hard to make some progress, and then we have public discussions where people criticize us for not being fast enough when, we made a pretty big lift for the team, including finding the software, thank you, Jessica, that could interface with layover our city software, which is not very friendly. That was work that basically got done in 3 or 4 months. And I understand that we all want to see a lot more progress, but I just want us to have a shared understanding of what can we really get done and feel good about. Exactly. We got 50% done, we got 75% done, whatever it is, instead of saying, well, you only did 99, where's the other 1% or the other 10%?
Yeah, for context, just as a staff person, responding to the prompts and questions from Tyler Technologies requires a lot of thought and analysis. It's important work. It has value, but it takes time.
Yeah.
And the great thing is, once we make that initial investment, it'll get easier with each passing year, but the first lift is hard.
Right, so going back to that public engagement fair type idea, is that a better 2027 goal then? Like, because I guess I'm just trying to, because I like that idea. I mean, I think that we need to have more public engagement around the budget. I think part of that is making the budget a more accessible thing for the public to understand, and that kind of presentation at fair would be, I think, very accessible in terms of, any random sort of person, regardless of your education, coming off the street and going like, okay, what does all this mean?
Right.
And I think that that's just a really great concept to have. But, is that too big of a lift for 2026? Is that a better, lift for 2027? That's what I'm trying to get at right now. That's why I'm asking when in the year would that be good?
Well, maybe if we think of it over 2 years, like in 2026, maybe we have this kind of fair informational, how do we spend your money sort of thing, after the budget is already drafted, and then in subsequent years, people would be able to maybe come back and understand and give input earlier.
I like that idea, except for the part where you said after the budget is drafted. I think that we should do it. I think that there's not enough time in there. I think that's the point when we really get hot and heavy on the budget and do the budget book and start hearings and doing slides and submitting things to council. We can't add anything. We can't add anything to that time period. But we could do something in like May or June where the departments sort of prepare what their programs are, which is work they've already done, and like a summary of how we spend your money, and they sort of start working that muscle of presenting how to present to the public the information of how we're spending your money. We have the 2025 budget.
I think May or June for next year would even be too soon. Here's my suggestion, and we can all throw out our ideas and think about this, but my suggestion would be for next year that we use the fair like either in addition to or in place of, or somehow think of it as the typical budget presentation. Like instead of going and hearing someone, so if you think about what is the public normally encounter, they can read the budget book, they can go listen to the presentations, they can make comments there, and already we don't have time to address their responses. But of course, all of us elected officials and administration are getting feedback and using the tools that the city, the surveys and so on that city puts out there to gather input on what residents think is important. So it's not like we're starting cold, but I would think that like a August presentation that's similar in timing to budget presentations might be a good baby step in year one. We've done all the work, we've got the numbers, we've figured out what the outcomes are that we want and the granularity, and figured out how to make the software work, and whatever adjustments we'll make to the formal approval and review process we have with council. And then here's a chance to explore as a community what that looks like in a new format, and then maybe move it earlier the next year. You look skeptical.
Does that add too much to, I mean, Jessica was just talking about the staff challenge of getting all the things together for the August presentation anyway. Does this add, because this?
Well, I think one thing that might be different about it, and I would want to talk to our staff person who lived through this once before, is that it wasn't necessarily department heads sitting at those tables. It was the people who actually do the work. So that might be a way to engage staff and the people who really do the work, giving them a chance to meet the public and explain what they do and answer some questions. So, and I don't know that we can decide today. Maybe it's even September, but I agree that July, not possible, June, not possible. I think May would be too soon, because I think we're gonna be scrambling still to figure out, to just do the math. You know, and like Lisa, you know, the Office of the Mayor also goes through this process, and our programs are nowhere near as complicated or long as what, you know, Public Works and other departments have to do. So it's a big lift.
What about prioritizing outcomes? I mean, we all, you know, have visions of more drivable roads, more walkable sidewalks, you know, better connectivity and helping people who are unhoused and all this. But, I mean, we have a limited budget. So at some point, we have to put some outcome priorities over others.
Can I tag on that?
Yeah.
So we're operating under a different fiscal climate. And when will there be estimates of budget limits that are being imposed on us? And what will that outlook be? So, Gretchen, you were talking about outcomes, and so my priority, I'm one of 9, but my priority would be a budget that doesn't dip into resources and reserves, a budget that doesn't increase future debt obligation. That may be a big lift. An outcome that avoids increasing burden on those residents who are already overtaxed. So if we're operating under austerity of some kind, then we should distinguish between needs and wants, and basic services versus expendable projects. So for instance, where you were talking about, you know, level of service or the quality of roads versus, you know, large projects that might be expendable. And then if we are to avoid putting a burden, which might be, again, a very, very challenging thing with the state, with how taxes are structured in Indiana, how do we avoid putting a burden on low-income people? You know, there are creative ways maybe to do that. So tiered pricing for parking meters, for instance. So, you know, if you have, you know, we have a common rate right now. If we were to tier it based upon location, we still have the opportunity for people to park who are low income. They may have to walk further. But the point is that there are ways in which we could approach trying to limit that. Anyway, it's a lot to say, but my main concern is what are we operating under? What kind of fiscal
Well-
box are we in?
I mean, I think those are really important questions, and I think the great thing about setting outcomes and then prioritizing them is that that tells us when you have less, however much money we have, we know that those are the priorities and the outcomes that we want. And, you know, let's say we had an outcome, I'm gonna pick one that would obviously be expensive. Sidewalks everywhere repaired and built and fill every gap in however many years. That's an extremely expensive, hard to achieve goal. But if we were like, if there was some sense of like, that is in our top three, I'm not saying it's one of my top three, I'm making this up just to be clear, just an example. Then that would tell us, okay, if you only have $100 and you have these 5 priorities, you know, maybe $100 isn't enough to get any single one of them done, but that tells us that that's where we should spend the $100 we do have. So I think the conversations go hand in hand, but I think our priorities and our outcomes might have to shift in terms of timing or scale, but part of the outcome is, you know, make there be more sidewalks or maintain roads so that we don't slide back. If that's more important than some other infrastructure type of project, then we would know that going into it, and that would help us move the dollars around.
So my preference, again, is basic services and making sure they're at an optimum before we entertain other projects. So last night we had a presentation by the MPO. They have new projects that are recommended by engineering. Maybe we ought to be thinking first of putting those dollars toward repaving rather than a new project of some kind.
But, you know, and this gets into, as they said at the MPO, sometimes those dollars aren't transferable.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, you know, we don't get to pick the project, someone else picks them, and if you say, I don't want to do that, we don't get the money back to spend on something else, which is, I think, a part of the budgeting conversation that could be really helpful with the public, and I know I learn from it all the time, because as a citizen, I used to always have these questions too, like, why don't you take that $2 million and spend it on fill in the blank? And sometimes it's, you can only spend it on that project.
That's really a good point, the fungibility of the money that we have. So anyway, I've said enough, but I'm just wondering so do we have a time when we might have an idea of what limitations we're operating under for 2027?
We'll know from the state estimates in, I think, June or July, so very late. And we do have the parcel by parcel analysis where we can get another the financial analysis estimate. But you know, we'll operate under that estimate. And I think we're still operating under the assumption that next year is going to be kind of similar to this year, that we're going to grow a tiny little bit, but not as much as we normally would have.
Okay, so we should have a good sort of benchmark.
Yes.
Where we're at.
So this year is a good benchmark for what next year will be like.
All right.
And SEA 1 was written to try to use the lit rate to replace the lost revenue and property taxes. But that doesn't take effect until 2028 when the new lit rates would go into effect. So there's 2 years, these first 2 years, 26 and 27, are going to be lost property taxes with no opportunity to replace it with lit. And so after that, after 2028, even though it wasn't written very well, they're supposed to fix it so that we do have the ability to pass a lit rate that will fully replace our property tax loss.
When you say in 2028, do you mean for fiscal year 2029 or fiscal year 2028?
Fiscal year 2028.
Okay.
So you said we do have a parcel by parcel analysis. So would that allow READY or in-house estimation of the SEA 1 impacts for 27?
Yes. They did that parcel by parcel analysis. They did ours first before we even got the 2025 net AV, net assessed value. So they actually need to run it again with our actual net assessed value. And I talked to them about that this week. So they're gonna have to run it again, and then we'll get a more accurate estimate.
How did our actual assessed value change?
It went down. Our assessed value went down this year.
Really?
Mm-hmm,
I'm not
yes.
surprised by that.
You're not?
No.
I am. Looking at our property tax bills, they keep going up.
No, there's a lot more salary.
What does that have to do with?
Doesn't
Sorry.
assessed value have something to do with?
The market shifting.
Yeah. So,
How much the neighboring properties are
Yeah.
actually selling for?
I mean, I'm kind of looking at Jessica because she has way more experience in this field than I do. But I mean, doesn't it have something to do with the market and how much the actual, like,
Yeah, assessed
value it?
values are supposed to be market-based. Not all of them are, especially multi-unit housing. There's other valuation methods. But cities and schools and counties get a levy. So no matter what the market is, we're going to collect, say, $5 million. It's way more than that. Like every unit is going to collect what the state allows them to collect. And your tax bill is going to keep going up mainly because our levies keep going up. The rate is going to be different. Your assessed value is different, but we're still trying to collect the same amount of money. And sometimes the market going up and down and your rate fluctuating doesn't really change the fact that we're still going to collect a little bit more money every year than we did the prior year. Our levy, we get to collect $5 million no matter what your assessed value is. Assessed value doesn't control the levy.
Right.
Yeah, so our levy is $5 million no matter what your property value is. Sometimes there are
That's
shifts
just
to.
an example, right?
Huh?
It's not 5 million.
It's not.
Yeah, it's not $5 million.
That's not very much.
Sometimes the share of the levy gets shifted based on like exemptions and deductions with like commercial properties. Some residential owners bear more of the property tax burden as a whole than commercial does. And sometimes if the commercial properties get more exemptions, that shifts more of the property tax burden to the residential. That could make a resident's taxes go up. And there's just a lot of different things in play with the whole property tax picture. But yes, our bills are definitely going up. And it's a really hard thing to explain to citizens as well, you know, that they want the city to change the way we budget and change the way we spend because our bills keep going up. And it's kind of like, well, our levy is our levy and we're still going to collect it. And your bill is not going to really change much if we spend less.
We don't have to collect the full levy, right?
Right, unless we could
That would be
decide.
common services. So.
Yes, we could not collect the full levy. That would be really the only way to for us to make your bill go down.
But if we don't collect the full levy one year, then the next year.
You don't get
We
ever get that back.
don't, like, if we save money this year and
Yeah.
then wanna like recoup it,
Yeah,
you can't do that,
No.
so it sets us all.
yeah.
So, I'm wondering if, at our December deliberation session of the council, we should talk about budget outcome priorities. And it's not too early.
Can I make just two simple comments or questions or whatever? But the first is that we shouldn't overcomplicate thinking about outcomes because we already have a lot of outcomes in all of our many plans. So the easiest way to go about this process, easy again in relative terms, is that you take our existing outcomes and that we rank them. We say these are the things that we think are most important for this year. And again, that may include just continuing services, but the part of our continuing services, like there isn't, you know, this also, it's like a misnomer, like that there's like just a stasis, like, right, like us continuing services, also there's a certain progress that comes with us continuing services, like filling potholes is like a continued service to some extent, but so very much agree with the framework though, is that by setting an outcome-based budget, we have the opportunity to actually have that conversation of like, this is not something that you dip into reserves to fund, right? But then the second part, and I think that this is, it's just, I mean, take it as you will. When we're thinking about change management, you want to think about user journeys, and we're conflating everybody's user journeys. So we're talking about staff user journeys, our user journeys, resident user journeys. You actually think about each of them individually and go, okay, how are they going to interface with what it is that we're putting out, and then ask yourself an outcome question, like what is it that you would like them to be interfacing with, and so then we should map those three. And so if we're going in between what does council need to get out of the conversations versus what is the city, if we conflate those two things, we're going to make a lot of bad choices, or at least overcomplicated choices. And then what we're doing then is jumping to, but what should we schedule in July isn't the question. Like the question is, what is it that residents should be experiencing in our budget experience, and then that will answer the when should we schedule these things questions.
That's another outcome, isn't it? What do we want our
Correct.
constituents to experience?
Exactly. And then the thing I was saying earlier before we went on that track is, I think one way that you could think about, and this gets to, but this is thinking through the lens of council, like how do we as a council do our job in actually evaluating and being a contributing member to the budget process. What I would really like, I don't know if I'd like this, but I think what would be interesting is to have the actual budget hearings be actually things that we go, here are the things that we'd like to hear. That it's not, that we don't need to talk about trash collection insofar as we all agree that, okay, that's fine, like we're okay with that. Like there's certain things that we're gonna focus in on. And so you could imagine, just picking the contentious outcomes and saying like, okay, we're going to actually work on discussing these publicly, because there's other things that maybe we don't need to waste time talking about things that are just matter of fact things. So you may, again, we may want to think about a different venue to inform the public about things versus you have our budget hearings, which are actually about us working on the budget and approving it. I think are two different goals.
I think that it gets really touchy to think about what we're wasting time talking about, because I think that every council member is gonna think that a different thing is a waste of time.
Yeah,
I think that that's the,
I just think
otherwise, who gets to judge then what's the waste of time and what's not the waste of time? I don't think that.
I think that this year we were presented a bunch of things that we didn't ask questions on because there was nothing to ask questions about, and that when I say we, I mean the majority of people on council, and that is both empirically evidenced by the fact that we did not write questions, and empirically evidenced that we did not ask that many questions in the session because we did not have time to ask those questions. We just go through, here's a presentation, here's a thing, okay, good, let's go to the next one. That does not, and then we still had to have a further deliberation session afterwards. You said in this meeting that the goal of those sessions is partially to inform the public. That's operating in two different goals. Now we can chew gum and walk at the same time, that's fine, but I just think we have to be clear about, if you think that the main purpose of the budget hearings is to inform the public, they take a certain form. If the main purpose is for council to give input to it, they take a certain form. But if you're in between the two, they'll become a performative thing. Now, maybe that's not a waste of time. Maybe we should be doing more performance, but you have to think about what it is that we want to accomplish.
I think that I actually learned a lot from the budget presentations, and I asked a lot of questions. So I guess, and there were very few community members who really actively engaged in that, but there were some, and that's what I mean by it needs to be accessible. That's why I like the FAIR idea, because I think the FAIR idea is more accessible for the ordinary person, and not just for accountants and professionals in financial fields.
Exactly.
I think another purpose for the budget hearings is for the council to understand the budget, not just to give input. It's a little late at that point to give input, but we need to understand how things are budgeted, why, things are budgeted in certain ways, so that maybe in the future we can have more input, but also just to understand what the heck we're doing. I mean, I think that's what I get the most out of the way we have been doing budget hearings. I don't think we've served the public well, because like Hopi said, you know, we had, what, 3 people who actually asked any questions?
And they asked a lot of questions. The ones who asked questions, like,
Yeah,
really engaged.
which is great, which
is
may be
great,
one
but-
wanting to get in this meeting right now. You knew we were talking about it.
Could I ask?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Before we go to public?
Oh, no, I just wanted to let him in, so go ahead.
We actually, back in the day, had budget hearings that were extremely, detailed. I mean, it was really granular. And the idea at the time was, if people at home were wanting to, or people who would come to the meeting, wanted to know what the city was doing, they would know in really exquisite detail everything that the city was doing. It was an interesting concept. It was excruciating. I think the staff really, it was a heavy lift and everything. I'm not saying we go back to that, but that did happen at one point. I was satisfied with budget hearings and presentations and everything, and I understand you're working under constraints that we're not in control of over. So what I was wondering is, are we anticipating any fee increases in the coming year? Stormwater, sanitation, parking meters, things like that. We just had a water rate increase.
Honestly, I barely digested this year's budget.
Okay.
We just voted, you guys just voted thank you on the salary ordinances last night. I am woefully unprepared to answer questions about our spending for next year right now.
We didn't work any fee increases into the budget, and anything that increased, we would come and do a full presentation and ask you to increase it at that time, yeah.
Yeah, a heads up, more than just say it landing in the packet would be great.
Right, yeah, definitely. I would like to preview those increases here before they even get to the full council.
Okay, great.
I learned more about what council was truly interested in from the conversations than I learned from the document you sent with your priorities.
Yeah.
So,
great to have.
and seriously, like, it is really, so I encourage, when you were talking about the being super granular in the past, one of my observations for myself about working in the city is that it is as deep and it is like an ocean of sand. And sometimes when you get in there, you miss the big picture, like, oh, I've learned everything about this tiny program in one division of one department that serves 50 people, but what's the big picture for how we're serving 80,000 people? Can get really lost in that sand. So I really encourage you, going back to that what is an outcome, to really think about how you can communicate with us in human language, not, here's what I think you should spend, but like, why do you think we should spend that? Like, why are you asking to create XYZ position? Why do you think doubling the budget of XYZ is important? When you say we value XYZ abstract quality, we might value that too, but we don't know what you think that looks like in practice. And so, all those conversations about studies versus infrastructure projects, that was fascinating. I learned from that. But unpacking the why and the big picture of what is the actual outcome that we're striving for in human terms would be great. And then how to figure out the people and the money part of that is much easier once we really understand what we're trying to do.
What do other members of the committee think about using the December deliberation session for talking about outcomes and prioritizing outcomes?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Depends on who has to plan it.
Well,
I'm already very deep in the weeds of planning the November deliberation session, and I have only so many spoons to plan things right now.
spoons.
Yes.
Yes. It's an internet thing, Google.
6, 7.
Oh my God, Eric 6'7" last night during our meeting. I don't know if anybody else caught that, but 6'7".
Eric Spoonmore?
No.
No.
Grulick.
Oh.
I can't remember what there were 6'7" of anymore.
He's
Very
too old to
distracted by
6'7".
that.
But anyway.
I'm sure it was an accident. Though he does have teenage children.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I could try to do it. So I would put my name down for that.
I didn't know what 6'7" meant, so I Googled. And if anyone is wondering, Google says the humor comes from its randomness and the fact that it annoys and confuses older generations.
Right. It means nothing.
I don't look at TikTok.
There's like 6-7 million kids out there doing it though, constantly. You got to put the hand.
That was a
Hand
good
motion?
one. That
Where's
was a
Margaret
good
when we
one.
need her? She was my
I actually, well, I'm
slang
really glad that
translator.
this is being recorded right now because I've been telling my kids for like 3 months I'm gonna try really hard to slip 6-7 in somewhere on purpose and I keep missing it. I mean, there were like 6 or 7 opportunities last night and I think about them the next morning
And
and
it's on campus.
No, you're trying to make it make sense. It doesn't make sense. Okay,
Sorry.
so let's go to public comment on improving the budget process. Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment on this item? We have KRK, somebody.
It's Kevin Keogh.
Oh, hi, Kevin.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, the first thing is, and I first want to always want to say, my intention is to add value and to improve transparency.
Which you always
Hopefully
do.
that's the intention. But I'd say number one, from a process base, to have, but before the audit, you need to have the audit completed, is I guess what I'm really getting to before you even start the budget process, I would think. I'm really promoting that, I know you've been behind and there's been some issues with that, but I'm just saying from just having the best data available is good for everyone. So I would really, and I know the due date is 9/30, but I believe that's a drop dead date. And you really can have it issued to the public 30 days after the audit is completed. I've not seen your engagement letter with your auditor, but I would think it's, it's in that, they agreed to get it done by a certain date, and I would hope, you can move that, to a June, May, June kind of deadline to get it done, and then just, because you think you have good data. So I'm really pushing that, and I've got my eyes on it because you guys say you'll be completed by the end of the year, so I'll be looking for that. The other issue is, I'm an accountant, so there's this concept of fixed cost and variable cost. And when I say that because if you know your fixed cost, this is your overhead, and this could be a significant amount of the budget. And this would be things that really you could do today, I would think, because these are things you have obligations for, fixed costs. These things you can put aside. Yeah, this is going to be part of the budget. We are obligated to do this. But then you look at your variable costs, and that's really focused on units. And how many of these things you need, these units, could be any, and they're really looking at the activity and what's the cost of those activities. And also throw out, I know you're looking at performance-based, and I also, is there a clock? I don't know, I'm usually up against 10 minutes clock.
Go for it.
So,
We'll have another minute.
okay, thank you. I didn't see the big clock, and I don't want to go over. But the other thing is, I know you're performance-based budgeting, but I would also look at key performance indicators. Things, and you can include that with it. But it's really focused in on these units. How many of these things are you getting done that are very important, and how much do they cost? I thought that I hope that would help. So that's my intention, not to criticize, but to add value. So I want to make that sure. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Anybody here?
Thank you, Isabel. This is Christopher MG from the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for your time. Fun, interesting meeting. I appreciate Jessica and her public finance, Kurt Zorn, Property Taxes 101, on how the pie works. And it's a little bit goes to the fact that I've talked about population increase. How do we get less taxes paid? You get more people moving into Bloomington. And that's going to be increasingly more important as we rely on lit more. So I can't stress that enough. And I want to echo Dave's point on sort of the fiscal environment we were in, because I was getting a little bit earlier, or is it, it was like I didn't want this sort of outcome-based to be a staff validate me. I used to institute Validate Me Friday, where we would validate all of the employees in our office. We want to get a sense of what are things costing and what are we getting from them. And that is ultimately that. And from the council point of view, and it's back to that public engagement, your best bet for public engagement is to learn the budget yourselves and explain it to your constituents during those constituent meetings or when people are at the grocery store. People don't look up things, they call me usually, because I'm usually at these meetings. This is their best way to get it, and you're the best sort of conduit of that information. So that's really important as well. From the council point of view as well, what is going to be success look like for this year? If we're in September, what is this priority-based budget going to look like as like we've succeeded, we're doing great? And that might be just a few things on what we're spending and what we're getting from. I use certain things like the leaf pickup that we don't do anymore, probably on a cost-benefit basis didn't sort of work out, the numbers didn't. And as we get into where this fiscal crunch comes, is we're gonna have to make some tough decisions. We wanna have the data in front of us to make those tough decisions, and the council, is, I think, is an important partner in that. So just keep, because this can go in a lot of different directions, and you can find yourself next September nowhere farther down the road. So that's where I'm hoping not, and I wanna be helpful, the chamber wants to be helpful in any way possible. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Any other public comments on improving the budget process? Okay. Any final comments? Looking at Gretchen because she has to leave.
Yes. Mr. Keogh has brought up our audit several times, and I just want to acknowledge that those are very important questions, and I'm not sure, it's been mentioned several times at various meetings, but I'm not sure the message is really getting through to the public that when we came into office in January 2023, the 2021 audit had just been completed. So I want to...
Office 24.
24, sorry. But the point is, our controller here and her staff have been really working very hard on getting us caught up. They inherited that delay, and we will be caught up by next year. So I share Mr. Keogh's enthusiasm for having the audits done and published on time. That's why we're cleaning up our backlog here, and I really appreciate, I'm sure he knows in his professional capacity, and I've been through audits before too, they are incredibly time consuming. It's not a, oh, we just whipped it out in a month kind of thing. It takes a long time and a lot of work. So thank you, Jessica, to you and your team for getting us caught up and back in compliance and back in being transparent with the public. We appreciate that. And I also appreciated Mr. MG's comments about Validate Me Friday. And I think that's one of the really tough things about making priorities and outcomes-based decisions is that individually you could pull lots of programs from the city and you could say, well, this program does something that's good, and the person who's working on it is working really hard.
Right.
And so it doesn't feel good to have to go back to the person who's working hard and doing something that's good and say, it is good, you are working hard, but we still have to cut it to accomplish things that are more urgent, important, expensive, and it's people we love and work with every day, and it doesn't feel good, but that is what that really means. And so I'm also not a fan of Validate Me Friday. I want to validate us for real.
Exactly.
I don't want to just,
As an entity.
where I give us a participation certificate and say, you get a pass because I like you. And I do have to go. Thank you, everyone. Good conversation. I look forward to the next steps.
Thank you.
Thank you, bye-bye.
Okay, is it all right if we go to the next agenda item? Which is actually the previous agenda item. Setting salaries for elected officials. So in your packet, we have the draft ordinance. Thank you. I think Kari drafted that. Thank you. Where we have a 2.7% increase for the mayor, the city clerk, and city council members. Is there any feedback on that, or does that look okay to committee members for us to forward to the full council?
Just a clarifying question. So when we do a COLA, does that change, it changes the base rate for everyone moving forward, right? So when people are elected in the next year, that happens. It's not just an adjustment to the current people.
It's for the position.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I really, it bothered me last year too, that the mayor's salary has some change there on the end of it. I don't know if that bothers anybody else, but
Seems weird.
I mean, it was like that last year too, and I don't know if we wanna round that, but I find it kind of obnoxious to have I can't remember what the random change was last year, but there was random change associated with last year's too.
I think that our salary ordinance has change on everything too. I think that's what it came up with in the budget documents, you know, we just try to be exact and put that same number in.
So it just happened to be that clerk and council member salaries didn't have any change? Carly's nodding.
That was the amount that
Yeah.
that I confirmed, and I think you're right that last year the mayor's salary had some change, so it sort of continues on.
Well, the grades don't have change. Like grades 1 through 14 and those steps don't have change in what we approved last night.
I mean,
Like I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, I was
Like,
trying to
there's
pull
no
it up.
change.
There's no changes.
And I think, cause I did check those to make sure
Timeline.
that COLA, I mean, I didn't check all of them, but I checked enough of them and there should have been change, but it was rounded.
Yeah, I think we really.
And I
have
think
that.
that the clerk
It's
rounded
totally
the
fine to take
numbers
off the
too.
change. I don't care either way.
And I think we should
Yeah.
send a message to Carrie, cut this 57 cents.
I think that I would have similar sort of like, oh my gosh, if it ended with an 11, hard enough that it ends with a 10, but you know, I don't want to slice a little $10.57 off.
So shall we just cut the 57 cents?
Yeah, just take off the 57 cents.
Sophia, there's some.
I mean, that literally is like my, issues
Thank
with
you.
numbers and evenness, but, I would like to somehow have there not be change and just round in one way or the other, and whether we round 57 cents down or, 43
Just
cents
take it
up, I really, not sure that I have a strong opinion about.
Well, then we should round up, because that's the math rule. Over 50, you round up.
The Treasury's doing away with pennies, so
Yeah.
it's consistent.
Meltdown.
I've heard that there's actually enough pennies still in circulation that it shouldn't affect us for a while, though. People just have to stop hoarding, you know, the 3 million pennies that they have
All
in
the
their
copper
house.
is gonna go out of circulation. so it doesn't matter.
All right, so, other than that change, so do we have agreement, and I think we'll need a motion and a vote, to send this to the full council for consideration with the adjustment that the mayor's salary will be $146,011.
Motion to approve, or to what, recommend to council ordinance on, to fix the salaries of all elected officials
Second.
Okay.
with with an amendment of 43 cents.
All right, let's vote on that. Councilmember Strasburg.
Yes.
Councilmember Rollo.
Yes.
Councilmember Asari.
Absolutely. I mean, yes.
And I also vote yes. Just more enthusiastic from the rest.
What was the last part of that motion?
With as amended, I guess is what I should have just said.
So with the mayor's salary, as Isabel said, of 146,11.
These motions.
These motions.
I remember.
Okay, does anybody have thoughts on the process and rationale for the future, setting these elected official salaries?
I did not go back in preparation for this meeting and look at the discussion that we had, or the survey that got filled out, but my recollection is that there was a majority of council members who wanted some kind of process, and so I guess my suggestion is to have, that information, to remind us all about that information going into our next meeting.
Yeah.
And kind of, and start working in some ways from what was done last year and assessing that. And I feel like this group might be a decent group to assess that with. I'm the only one that was on that committee, and I know Councilmember Rallo at least has expressed, I'll say concern with the, the result of that and like how those priorities were made. So like your perspective is just really different from what was presented on that, I think. And so
Yes and no. I mean,
yeah.
I just want to again say the process really was broken. And it's not a fault of the committee because you were under a time constraint. But having it land in the packet without a discussion from the full council, I think placed everybody in this weird position of at the end of the year during a very not well attended meeting, increasing salaries of ourselves. Mm-hmm. I think it was something that took a lot of people aback. So I think under a more relaxed process where we have more time, I know the mayor has expressed that she wants to see some kind of metric going forward, some rationale for setting council salaries, for instance.
I guess what I mean by that is like the rationale that we based our stuff on, like that you disagreed with some of that rationale in terms of like then the conclusions.
It was only lacking
like, totally
context
fine.
of other elected officials. That was something that was missing. Otherwise, I thought it was, the committee did good work.
I think that ESOC had more issues, and correct me if I'm wrong, with the principles that the committee came up with last year.
Yeah, and I think we did this process by collecting all of these responses, right? I think that each of the principles presents, in my mind, a sort of in some cases, like a what do you call these? If we think it this way, then there's follow-on. There's follow-on. Yeah, there's like a logical thing where we go, if we say, okay, if we're saying this, then we need to be consistent about this. Is sort of some of the issues. I think some of the other issues, though, are that I think they presented some of those following through with this thought presented externalities that we haven't figured out how to address. From my perspective, and I listed those in detail, I think, for each one. I think sort of regardless, there's going to be a couple of externalities, and I think namely the question of whether or not the sort of optics as always of setting our own salaries, I think, is always going to be something that has to be contended with. But I think we did have I gave some suggestions for things like that. Like, for example, whether or not we could establish a commission, external commission, and appoint residents to, have these discussions and make the recommendation to us to draft an ordinance. We've tried to explore questions of whether there's ways to raise salaries without doing it permanently. So, are there some type of structure that you can put in, and I'm not necessarily saying this is the best option, but you know, like longevity pay or something like that. Like, can you put in some type of structures that enable us to get around the fact that once salaries are high, they can't come down. You know, and then a sort of separate thing is I think that maybe perhaps the more important critique, and maybe I should have started with this, is that if you actually follow through with those, with all of those criteria, we end up, I think, where we were, which is where we are currently, which sort of gets at the sort of, I think, epistemological challenge, which is that if we're building a thing to justify giving ourselves larger salaries, I don't think that we did that. I mean, like my point is that you look at the standards and you'd go, yeah, like you'd pay us about $25,000. Like looking at all of those things together, especially then if you add Dave's criteria as well. So yes, I don't know if that's particularly helpful in moving us forward in any conversation, but
well, I think that when it came down, like some of the principles I agree with. I think that, you know, most of the principles that the ad hoc committee came up with last year I agreed with. I did read your extensive comments, thank you, on the survey, and I think you had some good points we need to incorporate. I think where the problem really arose is saying we are a percentage, we need to get a percentage of what the mayor makes.
right,
That somehow that did not
yeah.
lead to a dollar amount that I thought was reasonable.
Uh-huh.
And I think most of us obviously thought was reasonable because that's
Yeah.
not what we passed.
Right.
So,
But it even came that was a very hard to measure metric, because you say, okay, we make what the mayor makes. Is it all divided by 9, divided by 6, divided by, you know, a veto majority? Like how do you how do we say that? And then is it, you know, the mayor doesn't work sort of hour based, and so we made other arguments about like how much time we spend doing it. So then how do you determine the percentage? You know, is it like, again, so is it just divided by us as individuals, or is it divided by the percentage? And I think the argument they made was like the percentage of hours worked. And so, okay, well, the mayor doesn't work 40 hours a week. So, you know, so then it becomes, again, it's just like, what are we pegging it to? So I think we just have to be really consistent. I agree with Isabel that, you know, I think that it's a step in the right direction if we want to set just a thing that then automates itself. I think that that's the ideal, so that it's not us saying, you know, we by some virtue have come together, we've decided we must give ourselves raises, but it's saying like, here's a standard, and this is the standard, and we're going to put this standard to practice. So
right.
So you know, but again, it's like question of consistency. Like we have to think through it all the way, and you know, we cannot be inconsistent and say, well, you know, the mayor makes 142 and she works 40 hours, so we should make, and we work 25 hours or 14 hours or 15 hours, so we should make that percentage of what she makes. They're two different arguments.
So I want to be really clear about a couple of things. One is that the group last year did not start or envision or have any initial conversations that were like, well, we should be paid more, so let's figure out a way to have us paid more. That was not ever part of any of those conversations, and we very deliberately had multiple conversations where we very specifically said we need to start with like nothing and build something, as opposed to starting with an assumption that we should get raises or that we deserve raises. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. And secondly, in terms of that 40 hours, we also had several conversations around the idea of burnout and healthfulness, and looking at the 40-hour week, not necessarily as, oh, the mayor works 40 hours, so that's what we should base it on, but that full-time jobs are pegged at 40 hours in this country. That is the standard kind of weekly thing, because that is what has been kind of considered a reasonable number of hours to work to avoid things like overwork and burnout, and that somebody working 40 hours philosophically should be able to make ends meet, which I think is a democratic ideal. And so that is what we were basing that 40 hours on. Not necessarily that the mayor works 40 hours, but that as a full-time position, which we counted the mayor's position as a full-time position, that's what, you know, like we shouldn't expect, oh, well, we'll count the mayor as 60-hour position because we expect our mayor to work 60 hours a week. We thought that that was an unhealthful kind of lack of balance to expect a mayor to always work 60 hours a week. And so we based that 40 hours on the societally, you know, kind of accepted measure of 40-hour work weeks, which I want to recognize right now there's a whole lot of people who have to work more than 40 hours a week or more jobs than one because they can't make ends meet because there are larger issues related to pay in this country and wages and not just them, but also how much things cost. And so then people are stuck in unhealthful work cycles in terms of how much they have to work to make those ends meet. So that is where the 40 hours came from. Not that we think the mayor works 40 hours or only works 40 hours or whatever, was pegging it on the fact that it was a full-time position. And I just want to make those things really clear because I've heard those things a couple of times and I've tried to say that kind of comment a couple of times and people don't always seem to listen or hear when I make that comment. So making it really, you know, fixed again, like that, those were the assumptions that we walked in on.
Would you say like the mayor has an exempt or a non-exempt position? Like so when calculating hours for a full-time pegging, because you do build that into a salary expectation. So like in my job, I am expected to just work whenever I have to work. So I get paid as though I'm expected to work whenever I have to work, right? So like.
Probably to some degree, but I also think then that our department heads also have that expectation. I was just actually meeting with a department head this morning about something that we're working on together, and they very much were like, yeah, I'm really going to need the weekends to work on this thing because my weeks are full of meetings and I can't actually get things done during the week. And that was about the moment where I was like how healthy is that? So, you know, we also then pegged the mayor's salary to our department head salary in that kind of ideal way, recognizing, you know, we've got to recognize that our department heads also probably are putting in significantly more than 40 hours a week. And, you know, and probably a lot of people in positions, you know, high-ranking positions like that end up putting in more than 40 hours a week. Now, is that actually healthy? Is that good?
But that's our society. So
that is our society. So, but that's why we base it off of 40 hours.
And I think that's a really great point that again you noted, you said multiple times. I think though then there was a follow-on part to that, which is how much council members work. Like so the argument was based on the hours we work as a proportion of that 40-hour work week, right? So that then the challenge that I've said multiple times is it's like, okay, well wait, we have almost 100% control over the amount that we work, and so it becomes this, you know, it's like. So it doesn't, again, it's not the best measure of that, which so I say, well, maybe a better measure is that you say, if we like that argument that we're a portion of the mayor, and I think that's, don't get me wrong, like the critique does not say that this was like, you know, bad, or I'm just pointing out that like, let's follow this all the way through. If it is that we say that we like that argument, that we're a portion of the mayor, then my argument would be that we as a council collectively are. So you either divide her salary by 9, and you just say that we make the equal part of a mayor, right? Or you say a majority of council members is, because that's what it takes to pass anything, is what it is. But I think if we do that, we end up like at 25, right? So that would be my approach to the metric if we're taking that approach of, you know, pegging it to the mayor.
So my objection with pegging it like that is that assumes that all of us, like, so if we say that the mayor knows all of the information and all of the things, then dividing it by 9 assumes that each council member only needs to know 1/9 of the things. And so if we take what Mr. MG said earlier about one of our tasks should be as council members to understand the budget, so then we can communicate the budget to our constituents, we all then need to understand all of that thing so that we can communicate it effectively. So each of us need to understand all of the things so that we can communicate them effectively to our constituency, which doesn't mean dividing us all by 9. It means that we each have equal, you know, onus and responsibility
But we don't
to
all.
do that. And I know that we don't all do it. And that's where it gets into something that I
Yeah.
said earlier, that I think in one of the budget things, or maybe, in that survey, that like spitefully, I would rather everybody get paid less, even though that means that some people are getting paid less than they deserve, than have one person getting paid for things that
Right.
they don't do. And
Right.
that's where it is on all of us
Right,
individually
right,
to like,
right.
be a good representative.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it could be all across the board, and the only people that are at all possibly tracking that are voters every 4 years. And in
Right,
local elections,
right.
that doesn't always happen. In any elections, that doesn't always happen. We have tons of unqualified, underqualified people who don't do their jobs at all levels of government in this
Yeah,
country.
yeah.
And there's no guarantee for that. So spitefully, I would,
Yeah, yeah,
I would
yeah.
rather underpay people who are doing a great job
Yeah.
than overpay people who are doing a crappy
Well,
job.
and you know,
But
you
like,
raise,
how do
you
we
raise an
do
interesting
that?
point, is that we do have a mechanism that if we really, I mean, if we really wanted to go in this direction, right, we have a mechanism where as a council, you can remove another council member.
Only for
right?
non-attendance, though.
Well, right, like, so, I mean, but the point is, we could also change that ordinance in relation here, where you, but I mean, that's, I think is politically.
Getting a little extreme.
Well, right, because then it could be that I just don't like this person, like, right, like, you know, but that, I think, but it does illustrate the challenge, to your point, is that we don't have that accountability mechanism, you know, that, you know, we could be absentees, you know, in essence, or just show up to a meeting, having not read anything, say nothing at said meeting, and leave. Like, you know, like, but then there's a flip side of this, which I think is also, and I've raised this multiple times, and in the response, is there are some natural inequities then that exist, because what happens then for an at-large member? I have a larger amount of constituents that I need to talk to. Like, how do you balance that out, right? Or and I think, and this is what first got me thinking about the longevity idea, is that I recognize the amount of people that reach out and to Dave on things where he's not even their representative. It's just like he's been here long enough that people will include him in things, right?
Oh, I get
Like,
that
and
too.
same with
For
Isabel,
sure.
right?
We actually talked about longevity, and
Mhm.
we decided that was just not a good idea, partly because of how that could
It's
actually
totally
encourage people
to stay in, exactly.
to stay in office, and
Exactly.
that fresh eyes and fresh blood
Exactly.
is really, really important.
Exactly.
And that's, yeah,
Exactly.
we talked about
but,
that.
But
yeah.
so all I'm saying here is just, and we got to go to public comment, but all I'm saying here is just that, again, it was like that, the tension is that if we go with that thinking, we're like, yeah, but then, so then we actually think very differently about council president's salary. Actually, we have to think very differently about you know, if you're at large versus district. We have to think about committee assignments. But maybe that is actually part of the answer, is that you start structuring incentives for particular things. So it's like, you know, like, I don't know, and maybe there's like it seems strange, but like a bonus pay structure so you have a baseline with, then you say, you know, a council member, you get, you know, whatever, $500 for being on a committee or something like that, you know, whatever it is. And then it's like, but must attend 80% of said meeting, you know, like, and we have just some very stringent, so that we're actually getting compensated for the additional things. Like, I've raised this, I mean, I am on more committees and I have been, like, both 2 years. I'm just like, I'll do it. Like, you want to put me on a thing? I'll be on the thing.
That's
right.
actually not necessarily accurate.
Okay, that's fine.
Because I looked at all that. I mean, you're on the top of some, but it's also like every committee requires different amounts of work. Or every
Sure, and
requires
that's a
different
fair
amount
point,
of work.
right?
So
That's a
there's
good
like
point.
a lot of
So,
like variables.
yeah,
to, like, put in
because
that
like
kind of
planning,
thing,
because
and we didn't have
planning,
the time last year
it's
to
like
do it.
planning, for example, is something that is a very intensive committee to be on, right? You know, and so like thinking about like those assignments, maybe you just break it down. You're like, you know, planning gets $600 and the other one gets $100 and the other one, you know, we just have the structure, and then, you know.
I do want to go to public comment, and I do want to just before, okay, I'll get to Dave as well, but just briefly want to say that part of me thinks we should just not be spending time on this. This is not the best way to spend our time.
I also said
Like,
that.
Because there's no good solution. There's no, I mean, this is what I wrote on my Substack, like, there's no good way
Right.
to do this. Dave, and then we'll go to the public.
Well, just to say that Hopi brought up something last night that I agree with very strongly, and we all agree that there's extreme wealth inequality in society and extreme pay inequality, and I hate to be have this sort of baked in the cake in terms of inertia going forward. And so Hopi's point is that the percent increase of COLA in salary yields much more in terms of a dollar amount for higher paid individuals within the city. And that's apart from whether COLA is an insufficient measure of cost of living increase too.
Right.
So I would like to bring up lower paid employees, and one means of doing that would be to in some way cap the highest paid, keeping in mind that there is a differential of responsibility. You know, if you've got a problem, department head after hours has to pick it up or go into late hour working or weekends and so forth. So I'm not talking about absolute equality here, I'm talking about just kind of narrowing that gap, which I think was your intention of bringing that up, and I think it's a good point. So it is related to the mayor's salary, it's related to department, obviously tangentially to the department heads, but it's something we should discuss, I think, with the administration next budget cycle. Whether it could be, how do we effectuate that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, let's go to the public. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on setting salaries for elected officials? I think we have Kevin Keogh.
Yes. First of all, I was in on this conversation at the council meeting, and you didn't have public comment, so I was ready then, so I was hopefully prepared for this, but if not, I'll probably need to send you a long email. But first of all, the council service is not a full-time administrative or executive position. I think it's a fact that it's a civic responsibility rooted in representation and accountability to the people who live here. And that's why I've been throwing out this concept of the median household income as your basis. And this is something that the redevelopment committee or some economic committee out there has that data that would show what the median household income is for Bloomington, Indiana. And you can use that as your basis. And that goes up and down based on how well Bloomington is doing. So it's kind of a good measure. It's not political in any way. You don't have to talk about who else is making or how much time you're putting into it. You're talking about the successful outcome of people who live in Bloomington. Their wages are increasing. So, I really hope, sometimes I feel like an imposter syndrome. It's weird. But I hope you're listening that, that might be, I know you talked about this, but that might be a great basis to use or something very comparable to that. And I beg you to do that because this is excruciating listening to this. So, anyway, that's my point, and hopefully it's coming across. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none. I think we can talk about median household income when we continue this conversation at our next meeting. And I think for the next meeting, we should reread the survey results and have those in mind and see if we can come to any kind of agreement or plan for elected official salaries. So talking about the next meeting, I think that item 4 will have to be postponed until then. I think it's very important. This is part of our duties as a fiscal committee is to track the city's fiscal position, have an understanding of how we're doing. And so let's definitely talk about that next time. Let's try to schedule our next meeting. And I propose we have a meeting in November, but not in December, because in December we will have a deliberation session. And that can count as our fiscal committee duties. If that's all right with everybody. So, looking at, we used to do Wednesdays at 1:30, is that right?
I think what, oh, was it 1:30?
I thought it was
I
1:30.
thought it was 1:30
Yeah.
also.
So, if we look at maybe the week before Thanksgiving, that'd be the 19th? Yeah.
Wide open on the 19th.
Does that give enough time to talk about any deliberations and session stuff, or are you just gonna do that kind of outside of meetings and?
I was just gonna do it. I can, you know,
That's fine with me.
text you all for advice.
Mhm.
I'm not saying I won't need advice, but I don't think we need to do that in a meeting.
Say again, the time on the 19th?
At 1:30?
1:30.
1:30 on the
1:30,
19th.
2:30 or 3?
I think we should do an hour and a half.
Okay.
If
Where
that
staff
works.
is available.
Okay. Does
So
that work
1:30
for
1:30 to
Jessica?
3?
1:30 to 3?
It's
Yep.
November 19th, 1:30 to 3. And it looks like there is a room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does
Is
that
it-
work for,
is it this room?
No.
council staff?
Too bad.
This is the good room.
Yeah, one of us can cover that.
All right, let's do that. And then we are adjourned.
Yay.
Thank